Hi everyone, thanks for checking in today. It's Adam Coben here at Low & Co Realty, and today we're looking at the Wellington real estate market data for the month of April 2024 compared to 1 and 2 years ago, and looking at the graphs and analysing the trends. Overall folks, Wellington values are pretty soft again, as they are typically around the whole country. Message to sellers overall is that the market definitely is harder work out there. There is much more stock. It's harder to compete for the attention of the buyers. And the message to buyers is make the most of these market conditions while they last. So let's get into the detail. Median sale price, April, 819,000 versus just over 805,000 a year ago. That's up by 2%. Pretty mediocre, modest sort of an increase. If you look at the shape of the graph there, you see we fell steeply, then we broadly plateaued since about July 2022, trending up ever so slightly over the last sort of 12 months or 8 to 12 months or so. In the last couple of months, they're quite stable. If you follow these videos or follow my commentaries, you'll know that I don't pay too much attention to the median house sale price because it reflects not just the underlying values of properties, but also the mix of properties sold in that month. So it can be a little less reliable if what you want to know about is the actual underlying values of properties. The best guide for that is the Real Estate Institute House Price Index. So let's have a look at that now. Starting off with what I call the league tables here. Wellington, we are still leading the league tables. That's a league table you don't really want to lead, with showing the biggest falls in the value of properties since the peak in late 2021 at 21.8%. Now, interestingly, we fell down to about 26% drop, then we recovered to about 20% down, and then we've deteriorated over the last the first 4 months of 2024 recently, down to almost 22% down there. You'll see we're almost neck and neck now with Auckland City, which overall has also been quite consistently soft. Both Auckland and Wellington considerably lower, considerably bigger price falls or value falls than the country overall at 15% down. If we look at the last 12 months, however, you'll see Wellington's recovery has been stronger than most at 4%. Twice the level that we've seen Auckland recover in the last 12 months, and still ahead at 2.8% ahead of New Zealand overall at 2.8%. So Wellington's recovery over the last 12 months or so has been stronger than average, but we have pulled back a bit, as is typical across the country over the last 3 months. So 0.9% down in Wellington versus 0.8% down across the country overall. And interestingly, Auckland showing considerably more weakness there at 2.2% down over the last 3 months. So market conditions overall over the last 3 months or 4 months or so have been getting weaker. If we look now at the Wellington results overall there, look at the shape of the graph. You can see there the blue line shows the monthly results for the Wellington region. This is, so we've been kind of gently rising since mid-2023, and then you look at that orange line which shows the 3-month cumulative movement falling away there and falling negative over the last couple of months or so. Over the last year, we've seen consistent recovery across the 4 main territorial authorities around Wellington City. So that's Wellington City, Lower Hutt, Upper Hutt, and Porirua City. Obviously varying degrees of recovery, but consistent recovery nonetheless over those 4 main territorial authorities. Over the last 3 months, however, a bit more variability in those results, a bit patchier over the last 3 months. Wellington City, as you can see there, suffering the most at a 2.2% fall, whereas Porirua City still quite strong at a 3.3% gain. And that there is the graph for the Wellington City versus the whereas previously we were just looking at the Wellington region house price index growth. And so overall you see the city tends to have higher peaks, or has shown higher peaks lately, and lower troughs, and a bit more variability in between. So we did get up to a sort of a 6% price growth over 3 months, sort of mid to late-ish August 2023, and then more recently we have dropped down, as we have across the region, just to a greater extent. So moving on now to number of new listings coming to the market. So 779 in April versus 461 a year ago and 715 2 years ago. So that is a massive increase over what we saw a year ago, almost 70% up compared to 12 months ago. And you can see there the shape of that red line on the graph there. We have seen listing volumes which had really fallen down to very, very low levels indeed. The lowest we've seen since I started tracking this data kind of almost 10 years ago now. And then in the last 6 to 8 months, we've seen massive increase in those listing volumes. Basically what happened there, folks, is as the market really deteriorated, as market conditions got really tough for vendors noticed this and pulled their properties back from coming to the market. So those people who were planning to sell decided to delay their plans. We saw far fewer listings coming to the market. As you can see there, the red line just dropping right off. Then in 2023, market conditions got quite a bit better, really as a result of the low levels of stock that we were seeing on the market, combined perhaps with feedback that interest rates were close to peaking. This brought some more confidence to the buyers, which came forth in the market, combined with noticing that prices had stopped falling. And so, you know, it became easier to sell. We saw a gentle recovery in prices. It wasn't taking as long to sell. And then again, of course, the vendors noticed this. Later in 2023, especially when the election had passed, vendors started bringing those properties back to the market, and we saw huge numbers of new listings coming on, as you can quite clearly see by the shape of that red line there, increasing aggressively. And so in April, at 779 listings, that is considerably above even what we saw typically over the last 10 years in an April at 672. So not only are we seeing more listings considerably than a year ago, but we're even back up to more listings than we would normally see on an average April over the last 10 years or so. Turning now to the number of sales. So we just looked at the number of listings coming on the market, how many sales are coming off the market, how many transactions are actually taking place. So 576 versus 471 a year ago and 527 2 years ago. So again, we are seeing consistently more sales taking place than we have seen recently, but the degree to which it's more is far less than the degree to which we're seeing more new listings come on. So compared to the average number of sales for an April at 665, 576 is still falling considerably short of what is typical for the month. So whereas new listings coming on, we're seeing massive increases and even higher than what we typically see in an April. We have seen increases in number of sales, not nearly to the same degree, and we're still falling short of the number of sales we would typically see in that month. As a result, as you would expect, you would see properties taking longer to sell, more properties on the market, and it becomes much tougher to compete for the buyers in the market, which indeed is generally the sentiment that we're seeing out there. The amount of inventory on the market. So this is how many weeks worth of supply are we seeing on the market. So in April, 13 weeks versus 17 a year ago and 21 2 years ago. So 13 weeks is still way more, way tighter, if you like, than we saw 12 months ago and way tighter than we saw 2 months ago. And even compared to the long-term average, which is 15 weeks, the conditions out there at the moment are technically tighter than these things. So this would suggest a seller's market, but it is not feeling at all like a seller's market. And indeed, feedback from agents around the country are reporting that it is in fact more of a buyer's market out there. And certainly that's the way it feels on the ground if you talk to agents, if you talk to buyers, and if you talk to sellers out there overall. So why is this when we're seeing less inventory than is typical in the long-term average? Well, over the last 10 years or so, whereas the long-term average since they started capturing this data over a much longer period than 10 years is 15 weeks, over the last 10 years the average has been only just under 10 weeks. Now, of course, for most of us, we cannot remember what was happening 10 years ago, let alone 12, 15 or 20 years ago. So the average over the last 10 years is much fresher in our minds, much more relevant to our recent memory, if you like. And so at 13 weeks worth of inventory compared to the average over the last 10 years at 10 weeks, 13 weeks feels like a really soggy market. We are oversupplied so on that basis, it feels much more like a buyer's market, which indeed is the sentiment that's out there. That is the feedback we're getting from the different participants in the marketplace. What about number of listings on Trade Me? 3,014 in May, just off a couple of days ago since we were recording this, versus 2,550 a year ago and 2,950 2 years ago. So quite a big increase over a year ago and about the same as we saw 2 years ago. But again, the numbers in isolation are not that interesting. What's more interesting is the pattern, the trend. Look there at the shape of the graph. The blue lines there, that's the blue bar chart, that shows you the monthly numbers. You can see for the last couple of months there, in April and May, we have had more on the market in the Wellington region than even what we saw in the big high peaks coming into 2022, where we saw massive increases off a very low base as we passed the peak and the market deteriorated. So indeed, if we to get more listings than we've seen in the last couple of months in the Wellington region, we have to go way back to mid sort of 2015. Very long time indeed. So buyers, you have not had this degree of choice for almost 10 years. So it's good conditions out there indeed for buyers. Sellers, of course, the opposite is true. Much harder to compete for the buyers in the market. So folks, in summary, Wellington values have softened again recently, especially so in the city itself, as in city versus Hutt and Porirua. New listings have increased enormously. Sales volumes have also increased, but not to the same degree as we've seen stock coming onto the market. As a result, duration to sell has been increasing recently. It is now longish compared to what's normal for April. Inventory levels remain kind of lowish compared to long-term averages, but quite high compared to averages over the last 10 years or so. Trade me listings are back up over recent 2022 peaks, and we have to go back as far as 2015 to see more listings available on the market than we have over the last couple of months. So overall, the message to sellers is the market's now feeling pretty tough again due to lots more stock. It's quite hard work competing for the attention of buyers. Message to buyers, of course, therefore, is make the most of these most favourable conditions while they last. Big thanks as usual to Real Estate Institute and to realestate.co for all the data. Thanks to you for checking in. See you next month. And if you want individualised advice, of course, just reach out. Adam here at Low & Co. Thanks. See you next time.